The senator from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I think it is clear to the vast majority of the American people, if not to the President of the United States, that the middle class in our country is shrinking. Tens of millions of people are working longer hours for low wages. Workers who today, getting into their cars, are paying outrageously high prices for a gallon of gas. Senior citizens in the state of Vermont can't afford the skyrocketing cost of home heating fuel, and that at this particular moment in our history, with poverty increasing and the middle class shrinking and our economy in serious trouble, it is absolutely imperative that we pass an economic stimulus package. But the bottom line here is not just passing a package, but passing a good package. I think there were some positive aspects of the bill that came out from the House. I think from what we are hearing, the Senate Finance Committee is going to make that bill even stronger. But the main point that I want to make this afternoon is that when we pass an economic stimulus bill, we have got to get it right. It has got to be fair. It has got to have the impact of rejuvenating our economy and helping those people in need. Later this afternoon, as you know, the Senate Finance Committee will be voting on what I believe is, for the most part, an improved version of the economic stimulus bill that came from the House. I think it is right that the Finance Committee bill includes an extension in unemployment insurance for 13 weeks in all states and an additional 26 weeks in states with high unemployment. And that is obviously the right thing to do, because people who lose their jobs, people whose unemployment compensation expires, those are people in desperate need. Those are people we need to help. And from an economic stimulus point of view, those people will take that money, spend it, and help stimulate our economy. I am also pleased that the Finance Committee extended the rebates to 20 million senior citizens who don't earn income, and that was certainly a major lack in the bill that passed the House. There are millions and millions and millions of senior citizens in this country hanging on under low fixed incomes, getting their Social Security check every month, but having a very difficult time making ends meet, especially with health care costs rising, heating fuel costs rising, prescription drug costs rising. Those people need help, and it is absolutely imperative that if we pass an economic stimulus package, it must include our senior citizens as well. And I applaud the chairman of the Finance Committee for including that provision in the bill. Furthermore, I am strongly in agreement with the proposed package coming out of the Senate Finance Committee that low-income Americans who pay Social Security and Medicare taxes should also receive the same rebate as somebody who is earning $50,000, $60,000, or $80,000 a year. In point of fact, those people are most in need, and I disagree with the House provision that would provide them with a $300 rebate as opposed to middle-income or upper-middle-income people who get a $600 rebate. We should not provide a two-tier rebate approach. Everybody should get the same amount, and certainly lower-income people have more need of the money than upper-income people. So I think that provision in the Finance Committee proposal makes a lot of sense. Having said those positive things about the Finance Committee package, there is one area that I strongly disagree. Under the House package, the rebates were capped at incomes of $75,000 per year for individuals and $150,000 a year for couples. As I understand it, the Finance Committee would eliminate those caps, and they would say to the wealthiest people in our society, to the millionaires, to the billionaires, to Bill Gates, to Warren Buffett, that you will be eligible for a tax rebate. Now, at a time when this country has a record-breaking national debt, at a time when the people on top have never done it so well and the richest 1% are doing very, very well, based on anyone's analysis, at a time when the richest 1% have already received collectively hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks from President Bush. The idea that under a so-called economic stimulus package, we would be providing $500 to Bill Gates is not only absurd, it is laughable. And I hesitate to think what the American people will conclude if we go forward in that approach, and if we do away with the cap at $150,000, which the House appropriately placed in there. Mr. President, it has been estimated that eliminating the income caps for the rebate checks, giving that money to Bill Gates and other billionaires, would cost about $5 billion. $5 billion would in fact be enough money to significantly increase food stamps for tens of millions of the neediest Americans in our country. I don't think it is rocket science to suggest that it is more important to make sure that kids in this country get adequate nutrition, that older people be able to get some help in food stamps, than giving a $500 check to millionaires and billionaires. Not to mention that all of the economists agree that if you're talking about an economic stimulus, the fastest way you get that money out into our society is by giving it to people who are most in need, who will then spend it, not to the wealthiest people in this country. So I would hope very much that every member of the United States Senate will conclude that giving a tax rebate of $500 a person in a so-called economic stimulus package to the wealthiest people in this society makes zero sense. Mr. President, in my view, despite the improvements, or most of the improvements that we're seeing in the Senate Finance Committee, I think that, frankly, there is a lot more that must be done in the economic stimulus package, and it should be done for two reasons. Number one, for 7 years, we have had a president who has turned a blind eye to the middle class and working families and lower-income people in this country at a time, in fact, when poverty is increasing. His contribution to the process was to propose major cutbacks in one program after another. And I think it is time now that Congress pay attention to the needs of the middle class, lower-income people, and start addressing their needs rather than just upper-income people who have received so much over the last 7 years. Specifically, we must provide help to those most in need, particularly senior citizens on fixed incomes, low-income families with children, and persons with disabilities. We must strengthen the middle class in this economic stimulus package, and we must put Americans back to work at good-paying jobs by paying attention to our infrastructure, which has so long been neglected, with the results being that we have bridges and roads and culverts and school buildings that are in desperate need of repair. Mr. President, if we fail to pass an economic stimulus package that does not accomplish all three of these goals, we will have missed out on an important opportunity to strengthen our economy and to help those people most in need. Here are just a few steps that I believe we should be taking. First, I believe we should increase the stimulus package by at least $25 billion. I also believe that we should reduce the business tax breaks by at least $25 billion. Mark Zandi from Moody's has estimated that the business tax breaks contemplated by Congress would yield very little stimulus to the economy, much less than increasing food stamps or unemployment benefits. In other words, if the goal here is to stimulate the economy, the tax breaks being proposed for the business community in many ways would have much less of an impact than many other proposals which are out there, such as increasing food stamps or unemployment benefits. Mr. Chairman, if we did those two things, increase the stimulus package by $25 billion, and reduce the business tax breaks by $25 billion, that would leave us with an additional $50 billion. Now, what can we do? What should we do with this $50 billion? We could complete the picture. We can put Americans back to work at decent-paying jobs. We could help those who are most in need, and we could strengthen the middle class. How do you do that? Specifically, I believe we should provide $5 billion for an expansion of the food stamp program. Mr. President, in America today, poverty is increasing. We are seeing levels of desperation in the state of Vermont and all over this country that we have not seen in many years. Food shelves in the state of Vermont and throughout this country are running out of food. And I understand that in the agricultural bill, there are proposals to increase food stamps, but we don't know when that farm bill is going to be passed, so we have got to act now. Let us support our neighbors who are having a hard time feeding their families. Let us substantially increase food stamps and do it in this economic stimulus package. What else should we be doing? Well, I can tell you that coming from one of the coldest states in America at a time when home heating fuel prices are soaring, it is absolutely imperative that we significantly increase funding for the LIHEAP program. Many of the people on LIHEAP are senior citizens, and the rest are low-income people. With fuel prices soaring, with poverty increasing, more and more people are having a difficult time keeping their homes warm. We must significantly increase LIHEAP funding, and the economists tell us that that is also an important mechanism if we are going to stimulate the economy. Including food stamps, LIHEAP, and unemployment benefits in the economic stimulus package is not only the right thing to do in terms of stimulating the economy, it is the moral thing to do. We must not turn a blind eye to those people who are most in need. That is what has gone on year after year after year under Republican rule. It is time we turn that around and told those Americans most in need that we hear them. We know what is going on, and this Congress, this government will respond to those needs. And now is the time to do that. Mr. President, in my state, all over America, our infrastructure is crumbling. There are estimates that we need over $1 trillion to rebuild our bridges, our schools, our culverts. And in the process of doing that, this is work that has to be done. And the longer we wait, the more it costs. I speak as a former mayor. When you delay your infrastructure repairs, all that it means is going to cost you more next year. We can put many, many workers back to work doing this very important task of rebuilding our infrastructure, making sure the schools that our kids are going to are updated, making sure that they are energy efficient. If we make our schools and public buildings energy efficient in the long run, we're going to save money on that. But as an immediate economic stimulus, putting money into the infrastructure can create many, many jobs, and these, Mr. President, are good-paying jobs. So we're talking there about schools, bridges, roads, sewers, wastewater plants, rails, ports, airports, health delivery systems, and other infrastructural needs. Last year, about 200,000 construction workers lost their jobs, and this is a good way of bringing at least some of them back into the workforce. Mr. President, let me also give you two more examples of investments that we should be making that can have a very significant impact upon the lives of the American people. When a worker loses his or her job, in all likelihood, that worker is also losing his or her health care. And we have seen since Bush has been president, over 7 million Americans lose their health insurance, and as unemployment goes up, surely that number will only increase. If we just provided, for example, $148 million for the expansion of community health centers, That would be enough money to create 227 new FQHCs all over this country. It would put health care workers, it would provide jobs for health care workers, but even more importantly, when somebody loses their health insurance, they would have the opportunity to access primary health care, dental care, low-cost prescription drugs, mental health counseling. This is a good investment at any time. It is an especially good investment now, puts people to work, will provide health care access for millions of Americans. Mr. President, for those who question the appropriateness of including community health centers into an economic stimulus package, I would simply remind them that this is precisely what we did under President Ronald Reagan's stimulus package in the 1980s. It worked then, and I believe that it will work now. Another important investment that we should be making is to provide at least $500 million for the Low-Income Weatherization Assistance Program. Weatherization is a program that is going on all over the country. You don't need a new bureaucracy to funnel that money into the projects. It is there already in Vermont and many other parts of America. The needs for weatherization far outstrip the funds that are available, and many of the community action agencies have long waiting lists. And funding weatherization makes eminent sense for a number of reasons. Number one, the programs are in place. We can put people to work right away. That's an economic stimulus. Second of all, it is absolutely absurd that millions of low-income people continue to live in homes which are very poorly weatherized, where their insulation is lacking, they have inadequate roofs, windows, doors. They are putting money into their heating system, and that money is simply leaking out their homes, causing, by the way, an increased problem with greenhouse gas emissions. So weatherization makes sense in terms of creating jobs. It makes sense in saving people money on their fuel bills, and it makes a lot of sense for those of us who want to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions. Mr. Chairman, way back in 2001, when both you and I were members of the House, I was an early backer of tax rebates. I strongly support tax rebates for the middle class, for low-income families with children, and for persons with disabilities. I also believe that senior citizens who don't pay income taxes should be receiving this assistance as well through a bonus in their Social Security checks. But, Mr. President, giving someone $500 or $1,000 a loan will not fix the economic problems that the middle class and working families of our country are facing. Putting Americans to work at decent-paying jobs and helping those most in need is also extremely important. So I would say, Mr. President, that we must pass an economic stimulus package. We must do it as quickly as we can, but we must do it in a way that really has an impact on our economy and an impact on the lives of those people who are most in need. And in the coming hours and days, I intend to be actively involved in that process. Mr. President, thank you very much, and I yield the floor.